We're going to transition to Vishal sharing some of his insights for the next 15 minutes. So Vishal, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vishal. Still a bit jet lagged because we have this 3 hours difference. I come from Singapore. I'd like to carry on from where Linus ended. He alluded to security, and I want to talk a bit more about that. This is my title, and it's very much centered around two topics, trust and the importance of getting our developers productive. Now, all of you will agree that one of the foundational pillars of any successful relationship is centered on trust. In the human world, we intuitively know what trust is, and we do all that we can to ensure that trust is maintained. How do we do that in the digital world? Especially, Linus alluded to the fact that we are going to see a rise in digital businesses over the next couple of years. Plus, we are already seeing an unprecedented growth in the expansion of the digital realm. So what this means is that, as citizens, as humans, we are going to be exposing a lot of data, a lot of our private, confidential data with a lot of these digital systems, with a lot of companies. And how do we handle this whole notion of trust in the digital world? Right? So that's something we really need to be mindful of. So let me first of all set a context, set the context for today's presentation. What is digital trust? Now, there are different ways to slice and dice this beast, and it's a very big thing. I mean, if you ask IDC, they can come out with a big paper on digital trust, because it's not just technology, it's also process, it's people, it's governance, it's policies. But what I'm going to be really focusing a lot on is really the technology piece of digital trust. And this is how I would define as the definition of digital trust, which is nothing but the confidence that consumers have in the digital ecosystem to interact securely, in a transparent, accountable, and frictionless manner. Now, that's my definition of what digital trust entails. And when I look at it, in my opinion, there are 5 key cornerstones of digital trust. The first one being security. And this is all about, when I, as a consumer, pass you data, how are you going to secure my data? How do you ensure that that data is not going to be breached? How do you take care of my confidential data, protect it, encrypt it? Very much a technology piece of taking care of my data. Then the next piece is all around privacy. And privacy is not so much about technology as much as it is about defining how you're going to be handling my data. It's more around policies, it's more around compliance, right? So we have a lot of standards like, there's GDPR, in health we have HIPAA in the US. So it's defining all the ways that you can use and manage my data. The third piece will be around identity, right? You can have security and privacy in place, but you also want to make sure that you are able to identify and zero into the particular application or person who is requesting that data. And if you're not going to be able to do that through impersonation, which is very easily done in the digital world today, you're going to be exposing all this important data to parties who shouldn't have access to that data. Then integrity. How do we ensure that whatever data that I'm sharing you doesn't get tempered, doesn't get modified, it stays in the same original state? And finally, it's all about reliability. If, for example, a breach happens, how quickly can you overcome that situation? Or how quickly, or how effectively are you able to prevent from that breach happening in the first place altogether? That's a whole piece around reliability. So these are some of the key cornerstones of digital trust. And this is very important. I was speaking to Linus earlier, and this is one of C-level imperatives for today's organizations. Now, while that is important, there's another thing that is equally important, which is this demand for getting digital products and services out in the market faster. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be outpaced by competitors. And this is where you see that these two things are, in a way, diametrically opposed to each other. We want to make sure that whatever we do is secure, done in a secure fashion, but at the same time, how do we ensure agility, right? And what this literally means is that the key stakeholders, the key actors who are involved in software development, the development teams, the security teams, and the operations teams, they need to work a bit harder. They need to do a lot of additional things to ensure that whatever we are doing is aligned with the digital trust policies that we have laid out within the organization. right? But for today's presentation, I'm going to be just focusing on one of the actor, which I believe is one of the most important role, which is the developer, right? So the developers are the people who are going to be writing code, and we want to make sure that they are as productive as possible, because we know that developer talent is not easily available, it's scarce, it's also very expensive, so we want to get them productive. And when you ask developers when are they most productive, they are most productive when they are writing code, when they are writing more code, and we're writing even more code. So how do we get them to be doing this? It all involves driving a bit of a balance between these two sides, right? How do you strike a balance? And this is where technology can come into play. How do you use technology, tools and tech to drive balance? And there are a lot of different variety of ways to do that. I'm going to cover 4 key areas. The first one is around automation. It's a no-brainer. Automating things that are mundane, that can be programmatically automated. For example, in the security domain, automating through security policy as code. And once you're able to do that, you can easily roll it out across the various environments, and you take that time off from the developers' responsibility, and so that they can focus on writing code. Second piece is around how do you manage vulnerabilities. So when developers are programming, they use a lot of libraries. I've been a developer for the first 10 years of my career, and back then open source wasn't big, so whatever I have access to is, in a way, is trusted, it's proprietary world, right? But today you can get libraries from everywhere. We want to make sure that even before the library is used by the developer, it's scanned for vulnerabilities. But that itself is not important, because, for example, a developer pushes from dev environment to test, and then you find a vulnerability. How do you fix it? So this has to be done on a continuous basis, right? Scanning of vulnerabilities. And this should be done across your CI/CD pipeline. So this is what I would define as pipeline security. Now, what happens when the code gets into production? We want to make sure that we are also able to proactively detect things that are happening in the runtime environment, some malware doing things that it shouldn't be doing, and pick that up. This will obviously affect the developer's productivity, but indirectly, because if you find some vulnerability in the production environment, then developers will need to fix code, they'll need time for that, and their developer productivity goes down. And finally, how do you do that, right? So there's this whole notion around using zero trust principles in the area of cloud native development. And the premise of this is simple: do not trust anything. Previously, in the olden days, we have things like deny lists. You can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. But now it's, what can you do? So if you can do 10 things, anything outside of the 10 is potentially a hack. So you define different micro security parameters for your application to define what is possible and everything else is not allowed. So these are some of the things that we need to take care of, and if we do this well, we can pass back a lot of productive time to the developers. Now, SUSE, as a vendor in this space, we have been doing quite a bit to help customers get a better sense over how security is treated within the organization. We have this solution called SUSE NeuVector that allows you to have full lifecycle container security across your container environments. And a lot of the things that I talked about is able to handle it very well. For example, giving you a way to define end-to-end pipeline security through automated scanning of vulnerabilities, helping you align with compliance policies. For example, the CIS benchmark requires you to do a lot of Kubernetes tests, and we can do this automatically, generate reports for them as well. And at the same time, do a lot of automation, not just by helping you define compliance policies, security policies, but it is able to do something that is very, very cutting edge, something that nobody in the industry does, which is you have your application, you pump data into your application runs, and then it will see what are all the things that the application does. For example, opens a file, opens a process, and that is, then all the policies will be created automatically. Now, if in the runtime something else happens, so something else this application tries to do, then you can automatically flag it as, hey, this is not allowed, and you can block that action. So this is some of the ways that it can preventively address threats. So these are some of the things that NeuVector allows you to do. I have a customer story here But I think in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly skip it. And I'm just going to spend a bit, the next 2 to 3 minutes talking about SUSE. We have been in the industry for the past 30 years, the first company to bring enterprise Linux to customers. So SUSE Linux Enterprise, 30 years. We celebrated 30 years last year. A lot of the top companies are using us across all the various verticals, be it from retail to pharma to public sector. And I think one of the things that we do a lot is really championing innovation in the area of open source through partners and through foundations, through communities that you see here. So some of the top partner names are here. Biggest cloud providers are here as well. We have Microsoft here. We work very closely with them. The other thing that we do a lot is really participating in a lot of these communities to drive innovation in the open source space. And yeah, we are present across all the various verticals that you see here. So I think that's what I have for the presentation. Very short, sweet, but I am here for the rest of the day, and I'd like to speak to all of you later on as well. Thank you very much.